Good evening, brothers and sisters, cousins and friends, colleagues and allies. Welcome everyone to the second in the Black Equity Organisation listening series, Bridging the Gap, What is Needed to Improve Black Lives. The series goes to the heart of the BEO approach to addressing racism and racial inequality, believing that to lead, one needs to listen. The issues that need to be addressed should be decided by the many and not the few, and the answers should come from the people with experience and knowledge, not just from a few leaders at the top of any one organization. And finally, everything that BEO does should be evidence-based. That is why it gives me tremendous pleasure to host today's webinar, which will focus on researched and documented key racial inequalities in the UK. These will include healthcare and discrimination. At the height of the pandemic, Black people were 4 times more likely to die from COVID, and 75% of Black people aged between 18 to 34 said they felt discriminated against by healthcare professionals. We'll be looking at unemployment. Again, looking at the height of the COVID pandemic, Black youth unemployment was more than 3 times higher than white youth unemployment. We'll be discussing housing and homelessness. Black people are more than 3 times as likely to experience homelessness than other ethnicities combined, than all other ethnicities combined, and less likely to own their own homes. We'll be talking about Black families. 53% of Black children live in poverty, double the rate of poverty for white children. Now I have an incredibly, it's a who's who, it's a dream team for a panel today. We have Lester Holloway, editor of The Voice newspaper, which celebrates its 40th anniversary next year. Give us a wave, Lester. Thank you. We have Iola Olufemihan. He is a capacity building specialist at Disability LIB and founding member of Ascend, a group working to combat disability discrimination in Nigeria. I was reading that, so I didn't see if you gave us a wave, Iola. Did you give us a wave? Thank you. Next, we have Chantel Lunt, a writer, public speaker, entrepreneur, and activist, a former police officer. She is the founder of Merseyside BLM Alliance, and people already know to wave. Thank you, without prompting. All right. Then we have Janet File, OBE, is a policy advisor and midwife, UK and international midwifery policy and health equity campaigner. Again, because I'm reading, I don't see if people are waving. I'm just assuming you're waving now, as you've all been told to wave. Okay. We then have Ife Thomas, author and public speaker. Ife dedicated her time to empower and encourage parents to help their children figure out what their unique talents might be. Ife is the founder of the Confidence Star, a confidence building tool for children and adults. We have Bella Rareworld, who brings over 14 years, oh, thank you for the wave. 14 years experience as the UK's first Black professional networking speaker from London to New York. Bella founded a mental health not-for-profit organisation, Think Tenacity Academy, which provides mental health support to Black entrepreneurs and offers free access to Black therapists. And last but definitely not least, we have Lee Jasper, waving both hands. Okay. Fabulous. Lee Jasper is a British politician and activist. He served as senior policy advisor on equalities to the then Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, for 8 years. He has dedicated his life to exploring and addressing structural racism and ways to address it. Now, while these are our panelists, and they really are a dream team for me, many of them I know personally, and others I'm really glad to meet for the first time. We also have 3 representatives of the Black Equity Organisation who are present as part of the listening process. However, I should stress that it is an active listening and probing listening, and so I may be calling on them from time to time, and they may want to intervene if they want to interrogate any particular issues or any particular statements that somebody makes. The 3 BEO representatives are, and I hope that you know to wave now, Miranda Grell, advisor to the Black Equity Organisation, good waving there. Siobhan Aarons, co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism for Equality, Britain's first centre-right organisation dedicated to race relations during the pandemic. And Atiane Akech, who is a young historian, writer, and speaker. His main areas of focus are climate change, youth violence, and racial inequality. Now, the first part of this section, I will be asking questions of the panel. Then later on, I'll be opening it up to questions and comments from the audience. And there's a lot of you. It's wonderful. What a great turnout. This is great. So please start putting your questions and comments in the questions section as well. We also have British Sign Language interpreters, Rachel Jones and Rebecca Spencer. You shouldn't be seeing both of them on your screen, but you should at least see one of them on your screen at any one time. So let's go. Question number one. I want to start by asking everyone a very general question about Black Lives Matter and the global BLM protests of 2020. Many organizations, as we know, made public commitments to listen, to learn from, to act on factors sustaining historical and current racial inequalities and injustices. However, recent research commissioned by BEO highlighted that 60% of Black people don't see systemic change coming from the very institutions that discriminate against them. So my question is one that I think many people have discussed privately and a few publicly, is are organizations serious about tackling racism and racial inequality? Was the promises made 2 years ago all just for show, or was actually something achieved? Now, I am going to go to Ife first, but I will go around everybody. So Ife, what happened? Did BLM achieve anything?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's lovely to be part of this, and I'm very excited to be surrounded by fellow people who, have a voice. So this is great. Thank you so much. Great question as well, and we can look at it from all different angles. So the first thing that came to mind in this moment, because it's something that I've thought about quite a lot, just to back into this answer, when everything happened this time a couple of years ago, for me as a Black person, when I describe what it felt like, it felt like for most of my life, I had moments which I call paper cuts, microaggressions, little one-liners that people say, little looks that you get, different times where I've experienced racism. And sometimes I call them little paper cuts. But when everything happened with George Floyd, and it was there on the screens, and it was so visual, it felt like all those tiny paper cuts all came together, and then there was this big wound. And it was definitely something that I had to try to recover from or heal from. When we look at organizations who make big promises, the way I look at most things is the work that I do is around psychology, philosophy, quantum physics theory or mindset. And I try to apply what I've learned about human behavior across all boards. So if I think about organizations who are making these promises, I truly believe in the moment, the majority of them were absolutely genuine about what they wanted to do. And the ones that made the statements, majority of them were intending to fulfill those statements that they made. But what I think that happens is, in general, is that we all have these big ideas and these big dreams that we're going to do and how we're going to change things. But then when it actually comes to implementing them and leaning in and doubling down, if you don't have the foundations in place, you don't have the mindset change within the leadership, the organizations, you don't have infrastructure to build in on these new policies that you've put in place, what happens is they start to crumble. And they start to crumble because it's a bit like, and I'll say this, and I'm sure I can be controversial here. For me, it's a bit like the vaccination, let's just quickly do it very quickly because it needs to be done. But what we can do when we're trying to build something is it's about the foundations. So when you look at a tall building, a building that is really tall, what has to be done to build a tall building, it's how deep the foundations are. So the deeper the foundations are, the taller the building will be. And if we think about what happened and the promises that were made, how deep did we dig to really build strong, solid foundations so that we could carry on standing tall and these companies could fulfill what they've set out to do? And I truly believe it was probably, I don't want to say a knee-jerk reaction, but it was more like, yep, let's do that. Let's change our policies. Let's get that fixed. Let's sort that out. Let's say that we're part of it. But then actually when things start to go wrong and things come up and people lean in and push back and want them to be a bit more agile in their thinking, they don't have the foundations to support it. And yeah, I truly can understand why a lot of people would say that maybe things haven't been as we all would have hoped. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm gonna just looking at my screen. Lester, you're next. So, Lester, do you think what has changed since BLM, since in the last 2 years?
Yeah, so thanks for that, and greetings to everyone. I guess my first point really is that, at the risk of stating the obvious, there's always been an anti-racism movement in the UK, or Black civil rights movement, really since the time of Windrush, and Black Lives Matter, very much is a continuum of the kind of protests that have gone before. Where it's different is that it was a massive outcry of solidarity with a Black death in the United States, which we've never really had before on this scale, although obviously the March for Smiley Culture, which Lee Jasper helped organise, was pretty big. However, what that shows us is that while it's a continuum of the anti-racism movement, it's actually showing us the power of social media, and that's emphasising the tools that we have at our hands, which I think that we can have even greater mastery of going forward. And I think it's also pointing to the need for greater links and organising with the diaspora around the world, as well as allies around the world, and not just in our small island as we are here. But I think it's also important to compare Black Lives Matter with the Stephen Lawrence murder and the Racial Relations Act that came after that. Because 20 years later, we don't have a Labour government. We have got a Conservative government, which has actually been leading the backlash against the agenda, which has been forming as part of Black Lives Matter. And we've got a situation now where some businesses and the CBI on ethnicity pay monitoring are actually ahead of this government. So we've got a different situation that we had around the time of the Macpherson report. We've actually got a bigger mountain to climb. What we do have as well, which I think is slightly different to the time of the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, is that the agenda has moved on from dealing with institutional racism, which quite often actually then puts the onus on an individual institution to make changes, to talking about systemic racism, and the solutions to it, or whatever people think about the phrase defund the police. It kind of represents one of several radical policies, transformational policies, which came out of that movement. And I think that that it's important, I think, to recognise the intersection between those policies that deal with systemic racism and how those translate into wider policies which benefit everyone who is oppressed, even though there is, for people of colour, there is, a particular, racial discrimination that obviously, we face. What I think is important, just to finish up here, is that the Black Lives Matter proves that the anti-racism movement is stronger than ever. We've just got to build on those successes. But I think what it also proves is that the opposition to change is also stronger than ever. We've got, a whole ecosystem of media, from GB News to LBC, which are diametrically opposed to everything that Black Lives Matter stands for. So they're stronger, we're stronger. The battleground is before us. We know who the enemies are, and I think that we've got to take some heart from that and build and organise and move forward.
Chantal, I'm going to come to you next because you are founder of the Merseyside BLM Alliance. Lester's talked about the successes. What were the successes? What have we succeeded? What were the successes and what weren't the successes if we look at the last 2 years?
So I would say it depends on which way you're looking. If you're looking at the top, as Lester has alluded to, there might not be many successes at a policy level, but if you're looking at a grassroots level, it's changed completely, particularly in relation to us as a Black diaspora in the UK. We have linked up and networked in ways like never before. And had we not kept on pushing on this agenda, kept on having these conversations and refusing to let it go away, we wouldn't be where we are now. So there's been a lot of changes. You know, I'm doing an interview tomorrow for a PhD scholarship that was specifically for Black students, and that PhD scholarship would not have been there without Black Lives Matter. We've seen funding go into community projects. We've seen universities kind of wake up to this conversation and actively look at how they can advance Black students, how they can support Black people. There's been a lot of action at a grassroots level and at an organizational level. You know, we've had some of our most successful work actually with big organizations, community organizations. So there has been a lot of motion. And for me, though, the proof in the pudding is those people who met with us BLM 2020 and those people who are continuing to meet with us now. The drop-off wasn't as big as I thought it would be. People continue to meet with us, and they don't just want to meet with us when October's coming around the corner and it's Black History Month. But, you know, I'm just finishing my master's research now about Black political engagement and representation. And as great as it is that this change is coming from a grassroots level and from a community level, we do need that change at a leadership and policy level. And I do think in order for this to be sustainable, we need those policies to reflect what we're saying in this room right now.
Bella, lots of people talked about mental health in following the BLM, and even just talking about watching George Floyd's death being triggering as well. So from a mental health perspective, what do you think has changed, improved? Did BLM in the last 2 years had any effect on your work? And unmute.
I would definitely say it's been a negative and a positive. I'll start with the negatives first, because what the BLM movement created more awareness of the inequalities within Black mental health. Also say from a trauma point of view and generational trauma that we're still suffering. So it made it more appear that this is happening. The positive that came out of it was it allowed us, say, to have a platform. It's okay for us to share struggle we're having with mental health, or if we're actually diagnosed with a mental illness. So I myself, within the mental health service and the advocacy and charity work that I've done, I can see, for example, when I did, say, a motivational speaker engagement before COVID, you know, people in the room were very hesitant and had stigma to share their mental illness or struggles. However, when BLM came about, many of us felt more confident and more brave to talk about it. And I'll definitely say, if we look at mental health illnesses or condition trauma, with the BLM movement and seeing the video over and over of George Floyd, that instigated trauma. So the most positive thing was people understood what the definition of trauma was, or PTSD. So that was a positive outcome.
Okay, that's great. Iola, I'm going to come to you and ask you in terms of the intersectionality of Black disabled people in the UK. Do you think that there was progress with coming out of Black Lives Matter? Do you know, there were obviously lots of promises made, but do you think that they actually were followed through?
So where do I start from? A lot of information that, you know, people and data people brought forward and all that did not actually mention that Black disabled people were even more affected by the COVID pandemic and all that. So there was no disaggregated data, for example. But what BLM, for me and for us, was that we started actually saying that even in our space, in the disability movement space, people of color and Black disabled people have been kind of discriminated against as well. And this single agenda issue, you know, the social model of disability stuff have not actually addressed our intersectional experience and being erased from, you know, being strong and influential in the movement. So what happened was that when we saw, you know, that policeman kneeling on the neck of George Floyd. We felt, well, it looks like even the movement in the UK is actually kneeling on our own necks as well, not recognizing work that previous strong activists, Black disabled people have done when, you know, the disability movement started. People like Sadia, people like Ose Stewart, you know, did, and just generally replacing them with so-called white leadership. So, you know, as a consequence of what we saw and the Black Lives Matter movement, we also started our own disabled Black Lives movement, but we need a bigger and more sustainable movement to actually be part of the social inequality and racial equality justice movement, so that, because without us, you know, we cannot really start talking about racial justice.
Yep, absolutely. I was talking to people about that just last week. Janet, I'd be interested in what your view is with regards to whether, you know, that people actually fulfilled their promises. As I said, there are lots of promises. I saw black squares everywhere from every organization. Was it hypocrisy? Was it best intentions that they didn't fulfill? Which is, you know, part of the point I think that FA might be making. What are your view on what's happened over the last 2 years?
Okay, my observation is the fact that there were best intentions, particularly from the public sector, but never to be voiced the title Black Lives Matter. I don't get a sense that anyone within the public sector actually used that term. But there was an awareness, particularly in my sector, about what needs to be done. But with these sorts of things, what normally happens is that people know what needs to be done, and they just think, well, right, so we will ask Maud, who's the white woman that's always done these things, to do it for us, because we know we need to do it. So we'll get Maud, the white woman. She knows best about doing these things. So it's about the fact that if there's any failure at all in the intention, it's because of the non-engagement of the people who know what needs to be done, the people who are the ones not victims, but who are the recipients of racism and everything that goes with it. So that's one thing. But another observation for me, because I've got children who work in the private sector, commercial sector, and I work in public services. I think that is that bit that have made a lot of the effort, and they're continuing to see it through the private to commercial sector. And one of the issues for me, as I just said to you, I'm speaking mainly from observation and experience. One of the issues for me, the very people who should implement the wish list that they have or their intentions at a higher level are the same people who are undermining. Say, for example, in the National Health Service, you know, you have programs around racism awareness, and you'll have a politician speaking against it and talking about it in terms that, oh, this is a waste of public money. And if you want to highlight issues of racial awareness with education, you'll have a politician who would go on one of those nice programs to speak against it. So we're kind of, perhaps in the public sector, not really changing. The intention is there because you get the police continuing to do the same things that they've always done. You've got the right-wing politicians speaking against any improvement at all. And you've got the structure itself not changing as, not fast, even as a slow pace as it could be. So this is just my observation that the intention was there, but progress is very, very slow for a number of reasons, some of which I've just touched on.
Okay, that's great. Lee, I'm gonna come to you, but we're just gonna ask if you can be as brief as possible, because we just want to get onto the other issues that we want to cover today. Do you think that things have progressed after 2 years, or were there lots of empty promises? And you're on mute, I think, Lee.
It's a nuanced picture, isn't it? And that's the reality. Black Lives Matter has made an incredible contribution, moved the dial on race equality more in a year than all of the struggles previously, in the previous 30, in my view. It was the biggest outpouring of anti-racist sentiment ever seen in the world since the apartheid struggle and before the civil rights struggle. So it made a huge and dramatic difference. And what it indicated is a paradigm shift that Black people of today's generation have come to the conclusion that they cannot simply replicate the tactics and strategies of the past if they're going to secure race equality and justice in their lifetime. And therefore, there's almost a sort of, it's forced a global paradigm shift, what I call pre-George Floyd. You know, the things that we used to do that led to incremental, glacial, snail-paced change prior to George Floyd. And contrast that with what people are demanding now, radical demands for systemic change coming from young people. And they're not alone in the Black Lives Matter movement, because also there's a climate change movement. And these two movements have captured the political priority and the attention of the entire world. So I think they have fundamentally changed the atmosphere and the paradigm. Progress at whatever level will take some time to come. And it's also kind of nuanced and ironic that some sections of the private sector, although behaving in a performative way around anti-racism, some of them are doing quite radical things, way in advance of this of the government. And I remember from a time when the public sector was the lead in equality, and the private sector was bringing up the rear. And such is the shift that has taken globally that we now see, you know, huge systemic changes. Glasgow, is it Glasgow or Aberdeen University making reparations payment and acknowledgement for slavery? Sky, you know, putting millions into a recruitment program. All sorts of initiatives that I think you could credibly say were changed by the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think they made an incredible contribution, and I'm delighted to be, you know, around to see it.
Right, brilliant. In terms of some of the issues that were raised, and these are some of the things that we want to talk about today, are some of the racial inequalities. And the whole point of today is bridging the gap and actually reducing those racial inequalities, those racial injustices. And one thing which has come up a lot, because it coincided with BLM, was obviously COVID and health issues. So as I stated in the introduction, with higher maternal mortality rates, Black people 4 times more likely to die from COVID, and 75% of Black people aged between 18 to 34 saying they feel discriminated against by healthcare professionals. Can we trust our doctors? I'm going to start by asking Janet File, as a policy advisor and midwife.
Okay, I think we can trust our doctors because they have taken an oath to care for everyone regardless. So I would put that on record that we can trust our doctors. And whatever happens in terms of interventions, they don't seek to intervene in a negative way. I think the system, I'm speaking as a midwife now, the system of maternity care, because if you look at Black women, they're 5 times more likely to die in pregnancy and childbirth than their white counterparts. So the system isn't geared to care for Black women and possibly Black people. So when we come up with illnesses or conditions that people don't understand, it's very difficult to deal with it. So take, for example, we want a vaccine for COVID, and we did that in a very short space of time. So I will throw this question to my colleagues. If we wanted in this country and elsewhere in the world to deal with the problem of sickle cell, we would do it because we have the wherewithal, we have the capacity. It affects predominantly Black people, so I give you that. I think we could trust the doctors, we can trust the clinicians who give care, but the system itself is what lets down the people who work within them. The structures are not favorable to Black and minority ethnic people who are using them. Sometimes it's disrespectful. Sometimes it doesn't understand what's going on. Sometimes people of color, Black people, brown people, blue people who turn up for care are not listened to. And it is very difficult then to begin to assess where to put the blame, but I would put the blame squarely on the system itself that is not geared towards looking after Black and brown people, because doctors and nurses and midwives work within those systems, and it's very difficult that they can change it at a ground level. The best they can do is to be respectful in the care that they give to patients and women who are pregnant, and to understand the cultural and race context of the care that they give and of the people that come in to receive care.
Okay, I'm going to come to Bella in a second, but I just want to push you on a little thing you just said there, Janet, if I may. You say that, you know, people aren't listened to. You know, it's not the system that's listening or not listening. It's individuals, surely, that are listening or not listening. So, yeah, you said.
That is true. The individuals who are the clinicians, like myself included, have been brought up in that system that says this is how you deliver care. And so they deliver care in that way. They're not necessarily bad people or people who wouldn't listen. Say, for example, if you go back and talk about Henrietta Lacks, when they took her cells without her permission, or the fact that they haven't recognized that all the innovations and the progress we've made around cervical smear came from one woman. So it's the same thing that is happening. People assume that this is the way to give care. But what I can say about that is that we're all brought up in that system, and that is what most of us know. And it's going to take us to change it. But on our own as clinicians, we can't change it. We just have to influence and lobby the powers that be to say, look, this is not right. So if I look at my area, at the moment, we're beginning to look at, and thanks to the Race and Health Observatory, we're beginning to look at how we assess Black babies at birth. Do we continue to look at them within the assessment that we do? Do we continue to do the same assessment as we would do for a white baby? Or are we going to do things differently? So that is progress. And we've got my colleagues in education looking at the curriculum and about how you train midwives and nurses and what it is you need to include in that curriculum. Because for a long time, you've had your standard size 10 woman. I'm speaking now as a midwife and from a woman's health perspective. You've had your size 10 woman who is white, and she's built differently, and people have not, she's built in a way that people have not looked at other women who are probably size 12 or size 24 or built totally differently. So it is a question of a gradual change and education of the powers that be, that the change can come from the ground, but also you need policymakers, you need funding, you need people at a higher level to stand up and speak about the issues that need to change.
Okay, thank you. Bella, you wanted to come in. And I think you're on mute.
Sure, thank you so much, Janet, for that. I wanted to give my contribution from a mental health point of view, and Black people diagnosed with mental illness. And I'm also going by statistics and the needs for our organisation. So our organisation provides free access to Black therapists. And what we found in our research is when it comes to Black mental health and Black mental health support from GPs and doctors, that they don't trust doctors. And we see that in the repercussions, because when Black people feel that they might be having symptoms or mental health, say trauma, depression, they are very less likely to go to their doctors because they don't feel trust. And then what it results to is that their health deteriorates. And one of the reasons that there's a lot of distrust with doctors or the healthcare for mental health is it's very known in our community that when you go to your GP and you have mental health struggles, the first thing they're going to do is give you medication or medicate you. They're very less likely to have a conversation with you and discuss other options, such as talking therapies or counselling. And the other reason why members of my Black community within Black mental health don't trust doctors is because they feel like they're not being listened to. They feel like they've been jarred, racism, and they're not taken seriously. Or for example, if you're from a community where English may not be your best language, or you have an accent, it might be looked at as you're being ignorant. You're trying, with somebody who's going through mental health, they're under a lot of stress. It takes a lot of courage to communicate, I need help. And anybody's mental health, you're going through a bit of stress. So if somebody has an accent, be it from the Caribbean or Africa, it looks like you're being arrogant, or you're being, the doctor's going to feel scared. So that's why a lot of people don't go to the doctors. And I will say that there is evidence of the repercussions of trust, because statistics show the highest suicide rate amongst our Black community are within Black males. So that there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And that's personally why I advocate that we need access to Black therapists for people who look like us, so that we would feel more motivated and culturally they understand where we're coming from.
Okay, so thank you so much that we have a lot to cover. So Iolo, I see that your hand's up. I'm going to come to you, and Janet, I'll have to come to you very briefly because we have a lot of things to cover today, but Iolo, because you haven't spoken yet.
Thanks, Marcus. Briefly, all I want to add is when it comes to mental health and the distrust for the medical profession, I think that's also based on the fact that the medical profession basically just wants to fix what they perceive as a problem, when actually people like me, people with impairments, actually we think it's not about our impairments, but it's about how society is structured. But even going beyond how society is structured is what we are now fighting for as disability justice, And in my work, my day work as an advisor, many people with mental health conditions won't, like Bella mentioned, won't engage with their doctors because they just think the doctor is just going to be very prescriptive and think they are not even believed, when it comes to how, their condition, how they live with their condition, how they've embraced their condition. And when it comes to sickle cell as well, often people with sickle cell sometimes don't look disabled, and then they are denied, as well as people with mental health condition, they are denied things like personal independence payment and DLA support that will help them to actually live independently and go out to look for jobs when they can look for jobs. The employment system does not work for them. People have times that 9 to 5 may not be suitable for someone with mental health condition, for example. You've got to be flexible, but because it affects us as Black people more, this types of systemic racism continues to deny us our opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet, if you can be as brief as possible, because we've got a lot of other things to cover today.
I was just going to tag on to what Bella said. All the reasons you gave, Bella, plus the fact that if we know that doctors are treating us not very well and we're not turning up for consultation or help and support, we have to look at another thing within the Black community. There's something around stigma with mental health illness, and it is how we destigmatize the illness, and also, on the other hand, campaign for support and open, transparent way of treating people of color with mental illness.
Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to move on and discuss another big issue facing Black people, which is housing and homelessness. I talked about that in the introduction. I quoted the stat that Black people are more than 3 times as likely to experience homelessness than all other ethnicities combined, and less likely to own our own homes. Why is this, and what can we do about it? I'll start by asking Lester. Lester Holloway is the editor of The Voice newspaper that covers almost every aspect, not almost every aspect of Black British life. So is housing an issue that often comes up? Is it one that you cover at The Voice?
It is, and also, it's an issue which is related to employment. It's related to environment. They're all connected. We've been talking about systemic racism, and then this is the connection between them. That if you've got a low-paid job because of racial injustice in the workplace, you're more likely to be in bad housing. So, that's why we actually need to have solutions which cover all of them. The Labour Party talked about introducing a Race Equality Act. At the moment, that's a blank sheet of paper. We need to fill it in ourselves to make sure that the solutions, the policies that are being proposed deal with it. What I find interesting about housing is that in London, which has a non-white population of over 40%, we have 4 times more black people, 4 times more likely to be critically homeless. And that mirrors the disparities in employment as well. What it also shows, I think, is that London, as the most diverse city in the UK, having racial diversity doesn't equal equality. There isn't actually a tipping point when it comes to cities, which is why we need to act. But I think also that when it comes to employment, we need to have a focus on the subsectors, the all-white enclaves within employment, in order to break through and deal with the causes of bad housing, which is ultimately not having a job that pays. And we're unfortunately stuck in, or too many people are stuck in a cycle of unemployment to low-paid, insecure work, back to unemployment, and so on and so forth. And so we've got to break that cycle.
Thank you so much. Chantal, I see that you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on that one too. As someone who has been homeless when I was in the care system, I think we also need to look at some of the pathways to homelessness. So Black people are massively overrepresented in both the care system and the prison system, specifically the youth justice system. And quite often in both of those systems, when Black people age out, so the age out of care or the age out while they're in the youth justice system in prison, when they leave, there's no home to go to and there's nowhere to go, and they just by default end up homeless. And equally, when we talk about homelessness, there's various levels of homelessness. So for instance, you might be considered homeless if you're just staying in a room in someone's house, or if you're sofa surfing. But a lot of Black people, it's actually on the street homelessness, because there isn't that kind of resource within families and within extended families, extra room space on the sofa to accommodate people who do become homeless. So I think even in relation to property pool and housing associations having that understanding of Black demographics and kind of placing us higher, race isn't considered a factor when we're looking at housing associations, and I very much do believe it should be, especially race, experiences of prison, and I'd underline massively experiences of the care system as well.
Yeah, that's not a link that I had immediately thought of. I mean, I'm very aware Grenfell Tower made me very conscious that journalists do not find housing very sexy as a topic. Often do not cover it. So I was very aware of that as a journalist. Before I move on, does anybody else want to talk about homelessness and housing? As I said, it's a massive issue with regards to where we live. 50% to over 50% of the Black population in the UK lives in London. Grenfell Tower is an example of poor housing as well, and home ownership, access to capital in which we can borrow money from, and then build capital and that generational wealth. If we don't have a home ownership, can also be a massive problem. So I don't know if anybody else wants to come in before I move on to the next subject. I don't see a hand. I feel like an auctioneer. Going. Okay, fine. Let's go to the next. Oh, Janet.
Yes, I just wanted to say about homelessness. It's not only about being homeless. There's something about the quality of homes that Black people live in. Because if you stand in a street, or you go in an area where you have social housing, and say in Chelsea or wherever, and then you come into another area where it's considered to be a Black area, the quality of the homes are terrible in that area, where they're predominantly Black people. So it is the quality of homes and the amenities around and the state of those homes and the surrounding environment as well that we need to take into account, worse than actually possibly being homeless according to your definition, Chantal.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So we've just had somebody in the audience raise their hand. Now you won't be able to see them, but I've been told that they can be unmuted. So I think Dr. Liz Okokon wanted to talk about the issue of homelessness. So Dr. Liz.
Thank you very much, everyone. I just wanted to say that I've literally, since I retired in 2020, I've wanted to focus on our young people and their homelessness, because it's one of the things that contributes to serious youth violence and all the other issues that make our young people in the desperate groups for everything, including criminal justice. But in the diaspora, home is not just a house, it's land. And owning your own property and owning your own land has inspired me from the Chapeltown residents in Leeds, when the brothers there, all ex-convicts, got together, built their own properties. It was probably 10, 15 years ago now, because their parents and grandparents, and they're still in those properties. They got together as a housing cooperative, land, what's it called? Community land trusts. And they, someone learns the trade of electrician, someone learns the trade of plumber, etc. And those trades are what our young people aren't being allowed into. I mean, I've just had builders here, and it's a completely white shop. Often people are keeping it in the family, but they're not doing apprentices for our young Black girls and boys. So, getting to university, getting a degree is great, but a trade is something you can then have your own business, and we then as a community can own our own properties, build our own houses, like most people that are allowed to get intergenerational wealth. They have their own home, and we should be able to, as a community, buy land, form community land trusts, and make sure that we can educate and support our young people going through learning the trades, apprenticeships in the trades. Just to say that one of our colleagues in Huddersfield has set up the first Black Saturday trade skills school. So he's making sure Brother Mark Morrison and Sister Una, in the pursuit of happiness, their first Saturday school for the trades, so that young people 13, etc. to 18 are going to be able to have those trades and the technologies as well. So the STEM subjects aren't being supported by our young people. I was a scientist, and it was really hard to get the NHS to engage with young people, to get them into the hospital, not just as hospital porters and hospital cleaners, or even nurses and doctors, but those scientific trades. So I'm just saying that that's my link to housing. We need to be able to make our own houses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Okokon, and thank you so much for also offering possible solutions, looking at Saturday schools for trades, looking at ways of purchasing land as well. I know, having lived in Scotland for 8 years, there's some really interesting government policies with regards to community buyouts of land. Land is obviously slightly different in Scotland compared to England, but there's some very interesting solutions there that I've always thought might be interesting for the rest of the UK if you're looking at homelessness and housing and how communities can buy land. But it's not about me coming up with solutions, it's obviously the panel. And I see Iola has got his hand up, so please, and if you can bring forth any possible solutions that the listening.
No, I actually don't have any solution in my head at the moment.
Okay.
But I just want to quickly add to what Janet said about the quality of homes as well. For Black disabled people, or for disabled people generally, accessible homes also matter, and also government actually enforcing the rules around new homes, having wider doors and all that, so that people, you know, wheelchair users or any other disabled people can actually also visit other people. You know, it's just not us living in even an accessible home, but being able to visit other people and being sociable. And yeah, just quick addition to that. Thank you.
Okay, that seems like solutions to me, making sure that government policies are enforced to make sure that homes are accessible and that we think about the intersectionality of Black people and disability. That I would interpret that as a positive solution there. Janet, you've got your hand up.
Speaking of solutions, I live in Fulham. I've lived here for a very long time, so I haven't just come into the big price ticket. And if you walk down towards where you used to have your average normal people living in Fulham, both Black, white, brown, whatever color, you'll see that there's a whole host of developments around here, and they're empty. And the local authority that used to be here knew that they had to put in what percentage of social housing. Okay. But they let them off putting in the social housing. So when you come to the rules or the policies, they're not implementing them. So what Iola said about implementing policies, that you have to have so much percentage, all they did was say you could walk around our big houses that nobody lives in, like 80% of the homes around here, people don't live in them. That's one. And secondly, I think it must be the Netherlands, that if you buy a home, you have to live there for the first 4 years before you could rent it out. So you can't be living somewhere and then buying homes for profit. So we have to look at solutions around people come. I mean, it should be a real big campaign issue. So it cannot be that people can just buy homes and leave them hoping that it would multiply in value and they'll get a profit for it. There has to be something around the fact that homes are for people to live in.
Okay, now I've got a someone in the audience, Akwayemi Claude Garnett Akansanya. I'm not sure the name doesn't. Right. If you can be nice and brief, but I'm intrigued by. I've got a useful solution to share. I'd love you to share.
Sure. So what I believe that is a big issue is we need to make sure that Black individuals are able to have decent accommodation when it comes to higher education, make sure that they are delivered, and make sure that also within like the housing that we open those opportunities to people of disability, people of colour, and make sure that if a person who has a disability who is in a house, they can't have a mobility person to, of course, be, you know, surveying the house if they don't really understand what the person who has disabilities may need and the solutions which they may need to live in that environment. So we need to make sure that we have those representation. We also need to make sure that within higher education are delivered with decent accommodation as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. And as I said, if people, I mean, we've got some great questions in the Q&A. Through because I won't be able to call on them all, and yeah, we're having a very lively debate in the Q&A, so people might want to look at that. I want to ask a very general question now, as I hope these kind of sessions will help guide the BEO on the focus they should be taking when tackling issues. And I want to know what people think are the biggest issues facing Black families. Now I'm going to start by asking Ife Thomas, because she's the founder of the Confidence Star, a confidence building tool for children and adults. So, Ife, what do you think are the biggest issues facing Black families?
Wow. Well, so far the conversation has been, I suppose, emotional. So first of all, I'm autistic, by the way, just so people know that when it comes to, I have autism, so which is a neurodevelopment disorder that's characterized by significant difficulty in social, non-verbal communication, repetitive behavior. That's what it says in the dictionary. And Yeah, this is a really important topic to me. So with the work that I do, which is around helping people to feel good about themselves, it all stemmed actually from my family, my home. So my son, when he was 2, was diagnosed with autism. We were told that he'd struggle for the rest of his life. The way that the diagnosis was delivered to him is that we were taken to the hospital, and there was the paediatrician, there was the educational psychologist, the learning speech and language person, and all these different professionals. And when they delivered, you know, your son has ASD, autism spectrum disorder, to me and his father, who he's our first child, it was devastating, emotionally devastating for us. It was scary, and we really didn't know what that even meant at the time. So for our family, we had to figure it out by ourselves, because when I looked on the National Autistic Society website, that a person with autism is 28 times likely to take their own life. It says that 9 out of 10 people with autism suffer depression and anxiety. And then we know the general statistics of 1 in 4 people suffer with depression and anxiety. But for my son, I've got a black boy who's autistic. It's much harder, much harder. So when I talk about how it's affecting families, I would say that one of the biggest things, if you have a child with autism, I think that it is absolutely excruciatingly difficult to, one, the family, me and the dad's unit, because I think it's 97% of people who are raising children with autism split. And that's difficult on us, but then also going out to the community. So I think one of the biggest challenges that are facing in my world is definitely raising children with autism, because you have to fight really hard, and it's hard.
Thank you so much because I'm going to be asking later, but I think it might be appropriate now to ask about that intersectionality, because every family, there's no, 2.3 children, whatever it is, and perfect family, stereotypical family unit. And we need to, so maybe there's a problem in my very question, asking as if there's a type of family. But Lester, you had your hand up. What do you think are some of the biggest issues facing Black families?
Well, I think it's economic, and in good times, Black people are twice as likely to be in poverty. That's in the good times.
In good times.
In the good times, and over the last 20 years, and these are statistics that came out recently from the Trade Union Congress, that Black unemployment has never been less than twice as high. It oscillates between 2 to 3 times as high, but that's as good as it gets. So basically, we have to tackle the economy, because that's the heart of improving families in all their structures. Right now, we've got an immediate cost of living crisis. We've had a cost of living crisis in the Black community for time, but it's actually going to be even worse. And we know it's going to be even worse because the impact of austerity was even worse for Black communities. The impact of the last recession and the financial crisis hit Black communities hardest, and Black women in particular the hardest. So we have to kind of focus. And I would love BEO to really be prioritizing the solutions to it. And I think one of the key solutions really is not just about employment fixes, although that's absolutely necessary, but I think it also relates to the issue of reparations. Now, people might see that as a separate issue, but what we are talking about is the legacy of historic racism. This is the cause of the reason why we've got these racial disparities across the whole piece, across society. This is the cost that we're bearing now as a result of racial discrimination that has been passed through generations. And so we need to deal with this in the context of reparations, as well as looking at immediate policy fixes for employment.
Okay, so you've raised it. It's always a good subject to address. Are we really talking about, if we're addressing systemic racism, I'd be curious, I'll just do a straw poll of the panelists. Who think that we need reparations? Hands up if we think we need reparations. Okay, hold on. Let me just keep your hands up. I need to count. I don't count that fast. All right, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not counting the BEO representatives. 5. I think 5 out of 7. Okay. Well, I'll make sure that we return to reparations. Thank you so much for bringing that up, Lester. Chantel, you had your hand up. You can talk about reparations if you want, but you had your hand up before the subject of reparations came up.
I think one of the most pertinent issues affecting Black families is the education of our children. We are being absolutely underserved in relation to education. Our children are more likely to be excluded, which is a direct pathway to criminalisation. There's been no efforts to decolonise the curriculum from a governmental level, although Wales has led the way. Our children need to be learning an accurate representation of their history, and COVID showed us the teachers' projections of what our children could achieve were nowhere near what they were actually capable of. So there's massive unconscious bias, call it whatever you will, covert racism, that is impacting the progression and the potential for our children to thrive. I personally believe we need to bring back Sunday schools, Saturday schools, until the education is at a standard that serves our young people. We need to be taking matters into our own hand, because and I haven't even gone near child queue, and then when they're in school, they're potentially getting strip searched, and schools are being turned into mini prisons, with the potential that more officers are going to be going into schools if we take into account the announcement made by Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary. So schools need to massively be on the agenda for Black families and the standards of our education.
So would you be suggesting that BEO supports Saturday schools, supplementary schools?
Supporting Saturday schools, supporting supplementary schools, and organisations like RCIC, Merseyside Alliance for Racial Equality, who are pushing forward on a decolonial agenda being embedded in the education that all children receive, not just Black children. White kids need to be learning an accurate representation of Black history too. Okay, now you're in Liverpool, but you've just mentioned Wales. Yeah. I know a little bit that Wales is doing some amazing work. Their devolved government is doing some amazing work, because education is a devolved issue, and I think they're doing work on decolonising the curriculum. I'm not entirely sure. Do you know any more about that, to educate? Yeah. So this is a policy decision. It means that across the board, every school must embed Black history into the curriculum. Currently, this is just something, if you've got a goodwill teacher or a school that's forward thinking, we can go in there. In our, in England, there's actually policy which seems to be blocking organisations like BLM from going in, and policy saying that we don't want to promote a victim focused narrative, that critical race theory is problematic. So, areas like Merseyside, Liverpool, where I live, literally our wealth is made by colonialism and by the kind of subjugation of Black and brown people. There are few children in this area who know about it, even though we've got the actual only museum about, slavery and the transatlantic slave trade here. It's not within the curriculum or within any requirements at an educational level. The children should learn about that. All children need to learn about that. It's why, we're living with the after effects and the hangover of colonialism. So it's about following suit from Wales, who absolutely did an incredible thing, and this is why we need that policy change. We need policies in place so the organisations like ourselves can go in and decolonise the education system. And until that happens, we need investment in Sunday and Saturday schools so kids are getting that education as well.
Okay, I'm loving the policy solutions that are coming up. We need to look to Wales. We need to look at supplementary schools. Okay, fabulous. I'm absolutely sure that Miranda, Siobhan, and Atiana are taking note. They're meant to be, or not meant to be, I'm sure they are listening for the BEO. Janet, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I just want to make just a couple of points to the particular question that you asked about the issue facing Black families. It is one big fat inequality, and it starts with education. It is in health. It is in the justice system. It is in every walk of life. So it is about addressing those issues, not as they come, but as we know them. So if you look at the impact of inequality on our mental and physical health across the piece is terrible. The statistics are terrible. Some of us are walking around, Black women and men, with post-traumatic stress as a result of racism. We know all of these things. So when you look at education, if you take your child and put them in a particular school where they're going to do well, they will do well. But if you leave them in a school where they think, oh, well, they're failures, they're going to fail. So we need to look at the inequality across the spectrum.
Okay. Ife, your hand is up.
Yes, I was just jumping in just because what everyone said about education. I think education and expectations, that's kind of where I was going with my, absolutely. And I just wanted to share one thing that I put in the chat. I have a client who's a teacher, a tutor. She has a daughter who's very, very smart, advanced in fact. And she said that she got really frustrated because her daughter kept bringing home Star of the Week. And when it says what it was for, it always said like tidying up, putting things away. So her mum went into the school and said, you know, why are you not giving my daughter Star of the Week for like academics? And the teacher couldn't answer the question. And then when she had a look to see where the child was doing, she's doing incredibly well, top of the class. And she said, and she was so frustrated because I suppose this leans into what everyone's talking about. It's like the expectations. And if we look at head teachers and how many percentage of them are Black head teachers, or how many Black teachers are teaching our children, then what happens is that our children are seeing these people who are educating them who don't look like them, you know, and it is a problem. My sister's a teacher and been one for 25 years, and my old neighbour is a teacher and was a deputy for 25 years. And when we talk about schools, I've moved my children's schools. My son's 10, he's moved school 5 times. His brother's 9, he's moved schools 4 times. They're now going in a school that I'm happy with, but I will continue to move them schools, because every minute that they're in a school where they are being overlooked and undervalued, where the people don't have high expectations of them, every day it's creating deeper inner trauma with them. So if you're in an environment where the people don't look like and don't believe in you, then what will happen is that when you go out in the world and you leave education, you'll have a belief system that's built within you that is incorrect. And the parents at home, we're doing everything we can to reinforce the values and the beliefs. But when they go to school 6 hours a day, there's going to come a time when they say, there's nobody who looks like me, and all the people in authority don't look like me. So where's the place to be? So yeah, I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Iola, I'm going to come to you in a second, but we've just got a few more questions from, or a few more comments from the audience. I see Dr. Ekene has their hand up, I think.
Hi there. Yes, thank you so much, and thanks to all the panelists for a very illuminating discussion. So I'm a doctor and I work in South London, and basically it was just really just to talk about health and maybe the idea of a sort of a lack of trust. I mean, obviously I can only really comment on my own practice, but whenever a patient comes to speak to me about mental health, my first line is, see this as one of many as opposed to one and done. I mean, the reality is GP consultations are 10 minutes. And I always say that, you know, we're not here to create miracles with those 10 minutes. We're here to create a relationship so that we can understand. And the vast majority of the patients I personally see get very, very on board with that. But the other thing that we also need to sort of understand as a society is that despite the disparities, we are all so advanced now. People can't even tolerate having a headache for 10 minutes because they're busy with jobs and things. And so, you know, yesterday when I was in clinic, I had a couple of patients who just said to me, listen, I just want some antidepressants, doc. And I was like, look, this is the first time we've met. Let me, you know, what doctors really should be doing is assessing the risk level, assessing the severity, and making, you know, a case-by-case judgment. But the main thing is for mental health, what I'm seeing almost post-COVID is people, and when I say people, I mean all of us, you know, doctors are patients too. You know, people have a very, very low tolerance at the moment in terms of managing their anxiety, their depression, their sense of stress. And so what that means is actually people are more asking, more than you would imagine, for medication, a quick remedy. And actually the hardest thing I'm finding is actually trying to let people know that there are other ways, such as lifestyle measures, such as talking therapies, and these are all very well evidence-based. I just want to just speak about a solution to that. And I think that part of it is getting to a place where doctors and patients collaborate again, because we used to have that situation. My father's just turned 90 and he's a doctor as well. He still practices privately. He remembers doing home visits and having dinner afterwards with his patients. And I think that one of the remedies is just to get back to the community. And as long as the doctors are serving the community's needs and the needs of the person in front of them, I think that we can definitely rebuild that trust.
Okay, thank you so much. Just a quick question, Dr. Agbim. Do you think that your relationship with your Black patients is different than maybe your white colleagues? Should BO be looking at the number of, when you're talking about building up that trust and building up the community, does it matter who the doctors are, the ethnicity of the doctors vis-a-vis the patients?
I'll sort of answer this in two ways. I mean, so I think there is a bit of a policy that patients shouldn't necessarily be saying, right, I only want to be seen by a white doctor, or I only want to be seen by a Black doctor. So that can be seen as discriminatory. And obviously we're all aware on the impact of services. I think that, and this is a very personal answer from me, I think that definitely my patients who come from ethnic minority backgrounds, their expectation of me feels different than my non-ethnic minority patients. However, I see that as a positive. And the whole point is all my patients are diverse, all my colleagues are diverse, and they're all going to have diverse needs. And, you know, medicine is my vocation, and so I'm there to serve. But I do think that there needs to be more discussion. And when I do speak with my Asian colleagues, my South Asian colleagues, they basically say the same. When they have patients who come from the same country as them, there is this higher expectation. And so, but again, you know, as healthcare practitioners, we have to navigate all of that. But without trust and without an understanding, you know, between both parties, and also just mutual respect, it becomes very difficult.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for that. And if people want to look at both the chat and the Q&A, there's some really interesting comments, especially thank you so much, Janet, for engaging in the comments on that as well. Iola, you've had your hand up and you've been very patient for a while. Apologies for keeping you waiting.
No,
yeah, please come in.
No, I apologize. I just really wanted to just add to, you know, the conversation around education that ableism and racism always go hand to hand. And if you remember you know, all those schools that we learned in the past, you know, educational subnormal schools, Black children were the majority that were kind of shifted into those schools, and it's still continuing today. You know, any little thing, if you're Black, boom, you're excluded from school. You know, and I felt what Ife was saying, you know, about our own experience, and it's an experience that most disabled children and families feel, because as soon as you're born with an impairment, it's almost like the society wants to mourn with you instead of actually to celebrate that a child has been born. You know, and that obviously when we later look at intersectionality, it's in the forefront of why we fight as Black disabled people, fighting the injustice that we feel in this white dominated society. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. And I was going to go to intersectionality next. I just wanted to remind everybody in the audience just to be patient with us. There's so much that we're trying to cover today, and the debates in both the Q&A and in the chat are absolutely brilliant. And again, reminding the panelists, if they want to go into the Q&A, if they want to go into the chat, they should feel free to, or they should to answer the questions, because there's some really interesting questions that are being raised. I can't go to all of them. And, there's also some really interesting conversations going on in the chat bar. So that would be great. Talking of, you just raised, Iola, the issue of intersectionality, of making sure that when we think of schooling, when we think of education, that we also need to think how that impacts on Black disabled people as well, and how ableism plays a part as well with regards to our struggle for racial equality. What do you think are some of the, and I'll throw this out to everybody, but I'll start with you, Iola. What do you think are some of the biggest problems with regards to combating disability, discrimination in the Black community? Is it, does the Black community really understand? Is it imposed on? So what are some of the biggest issues affecting Black disabled people?
Obviously, the biggest thing affecting Black disabled people is the extra layer of oppression we feel as being Black and being disabled. But I won't blame the Black community for adding to that oppression. I think because, like I mentioned earlier, ableism and racism go hand in hand together, because it's all based on the dominant group feeling superior and using those tools to actually oppress us together. Because if you look at even the slave trade, a lot of people that were transported across the oceans to America, many of them were made disabled simply because they didn't want them to escape from the plantations. And that links to what racism actually does psychologically to people, disabling Black society, Black communities, stopping us from achieving our potentials and being really equal. And even, like I mentioned earlier, we have what we call the social model of disability, which obviously pushes back against the medical model. And we're saying that, look, I might have an impairment, I might be a wheelchair user. That's not the issue. The issue is how society is constructed. But even that model does not address the issue of racism, because racism is embedded in society, is conditioned into society for some people to think they're superior based on, history, science, and slavery and all those things, But for an organization like BEO, what BEO needs to start doing is actually to allow people who live this experience to lead in providing the solution, is actually looking at everything that they do as an organization through the lens of intersectionality. And not only, Black disabled people, but Black people from the LGBTQ community, Black people who are immigrants like me, all are intersecting identities that affect our outcomes and equities, of what we achieve in the society and how we achieve equality. So again, if we start working with people from all these groups and align them to lead, align them to provide a solution, communicating and saying that we are not only addressing racism, but we're also addressing intersectionality as it affects disabled people, as it affects people from the LGBTQ community. And remember, a disabled person can actually have all those identities as well, can experience all the characteristics that we have in the Equality Act, as a Black disabled person, a white disabled woman from the LGBTQ community, a person of faith, a Muslim, a Jew, it's all intersecting. So BEO could be a pace setter in addressing that and actually being an example for other organizations taking this issue seriously. Yes. So your project, you're not only just going to use equality impact assessment and all that, but you got to insert into it disability, equality strands. You've got to look at things through intersectionality. You've got to look at the different layers of oppression and addressing them. But without us, nothing about us without us. So we must be in the center of the conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Now, we've had two members of the audience have had their hand up very patiently. So we'll come to you, Lester, but I just want to go to Alexandra Ruddock and followed by Keisha, who have been patiently waiting. So Alexandra first.
Hello, thank you so much. And firstly, I would just really like to highlight Rebecca and Rachel in this. They are doing what an incredible job at this BSL. I mean, take my hands off to you. What I wanted to say on the first point of BLM is that no group, organization, however you want to describe it, is ever going to completely change what's going on, but they're definitely progressing the race agenda. But I think what we really need to do is take this into our own hands as a community and really see what we can do within our community. So comments that Chantel made about Saturday and Sunday schools are definitely up there with what we need to do. If we want change, we can't leave it in the hands of white people to do that, because unfortunately, we are not going to get the change that we want. We need community patrols. We don't need policing in schools. We need our communities in our schools defending our people. And we also need Black communities on leadership boards, whether it's in schools as PTAs, whether it's just a representation. But what we're finding is that these people, for example, they come over to this country, they're on a visa, let's say, no access to public funds, they're having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to support their families. So things like after school clubs or parents' evening, they can't attend because they're working just to make ends meet. So what we need to do is come together as a collective, and what we need to do is make sure that we're representing in every force. We need to make sure that we completely decolonize the education system and dismantle it all and re-engage it, rebuild it to focus on what we need it to focus on, because ultimately our children and our grandchildren are going to suffer the way that we've suffered, and we can't allow this just to continue. So we need to make these conversations change the narrative for Black children and Black generations following us.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, and thank you so much for being so patient. Keisha from the audience, I think you had your hand up. Oh, here we go.
Hello.
Hello, Keisha.
Hi there. I'm not going to pretend to you. I've logged in, and sadly, it just sounds to me like it's another organisation, headed by well-spoken individuals, who have no idea what is needed because they're never on ground level. Why there's no change is because all the people who have the actual answers dismissed because they do not fit within a certain criteria for their opinions to be respected. Some of the millions that are being made, or the millions that are being drafted for this organization, should be used to provide a place where Black people can come out of their mental illusions and can be encouraged and motivated towards greatness. My thing is that the people who know what's going on and know what is needed, they are completely disrespected, walked past, and dismissed. And I think that is what pains me more than ever. I'm quite tired of people who have got to a certain position in their careers, and respect to them. I don't take nothing away from them, but I'm just tired of hearing the same old stuff coming from the same old organizations, and nothing is being done. This chat, for example, no. Sorry about that. Yeah, this chat, for example, the title of the chat is sorry if I can get it back, is what is needed to improve Black lives. What is needed to improve Black lives? I came into this chat to hear about what people think is needed to improve my life as a Black woman, my son's life as a Black man, my daughter's life as Black. And I haven't heard that. All I'm hearing about is the same old, what organizations are there and what's wrong in the schools. Everything I've heard today, I have been hearing for years and years and years and years and years. And I just think someone needs to understand that it's not about your career, it's not about where you stand, it's not about how well you speak or what house you live in. It's about your mental health. And mental health comes in various forms. Mental health right now is very rife, and a lot of it is kind of goes unnoticed. So, for example, members like myself or whoever else has been in good positions or good careers and have good jobs, we have a certain area of mental health too. There's a certain mental health happening with these people, with the people like yourselves who are in positions that don't care to go and ask the person on the street with the drink in their hand, you know, what needs to change, because they are the ones that are experiencing the realness of life. They are the ones that have been failed by the system, have been failed by their families and their cultures. They are the ones that have the answers. But what do? You'll have your briefcase on your suit and you'll walk right past them on the street and be in areas where you don't see these people. So I'm very happy to know about the organization. I'm very happy to be in and listening. But I just feel like, once again, it's just the same old people talking about things that we've spoken about before. We've spoken about every single thing before. I cannot tell you how many meetings I have had and how many organizations I've been part of. Can I just finish? I'll just close and say, we need an institution. We need a building. We need somewhere where we can claim as our own and walk into and have hundreds of rooms, for example, like Stonebridge Park Complex, which we've lost, hundreds of rooms where different types of education can happen, because we have been brainwashed, we are still colonized, and we just need to take ourselves away from that. But I'm sorry to say, I don't think it's going to happen with people that are in high positions with high careers. I just think it's going to happen from people on ground level that need to be respected, encouraged, and they need to be the ones to bring the younger generation. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Keisha. Now, just before I come to you, Lester, I was going to come to you, Lester, just after Keisha. I see that Siobhan, who is a BEO trustee and this is all part of the listening project, and so the listening sessions is to hear people both come with solutions and also to talk about what they feel that the BEO might be doing right, and also what it might be doing wrong and how to improve BEO. And so I saw that Siobhan, a BEO trustee, put her hand up pretty quickly when Keisha was making some of those comments. So I assume you want to address some of the comments that Keisha was making.
Thank you so much, Marcus. And in particular, thank you, Keisha, for your comments. Apologies also if I pronounced your name incorrectly. Also, apologies for the accent, which has been learned and developed over the course of my education and my fortunate career. And I just want to say it's really important that through these sessions we actually hear from everyone on the ground, and that is so appreciated by us, genuinely. You know, there's a few of us on the call taking notes. As you can see, it is being recorded, so we actually make sure that we are getting that broad sweep. You're right, there are a lot of things that have been talked about, and there's a lot of things that have been promoted and said, and yet it seems to not go anywhere. And really, for us as the organisation, as we are today, and what we are looking to create is to, in the words of the title of this talk, is to bridge the gap, is to make sure that we're not hearing from the same people in the same way, and that we're not putting forward that kind of tired solution. So thank you again for speaking. I think it actually came at a critical time in the discussion to sort of make sure that we bring it back to what it is that we need to be hearing and what it is that we should be using this opportunity to talk about. So I know there's been a lot of comments in the chat function. Please, everybody, keep doing that, you know, and obviously be critical of what it is that all of us have to say to really help form what it is that will be taken away from this discussion. It isn't just about hearing from our panelists, it really is hearing from all of you attendees who are taking the time out today, because what we do want to do is to ensure that as we go forward as BEO, it's not the same but we are using this as an opportunity to start really interrogating what is the perceptions and the known facts of the problems and the solutions, and then also that there are things that are implementable and can have a tangible difference. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. Now, what I want to do is, Lester, you had your hand up first, then Ife, then Bella, and Etienne, oh, you put your hand up again. I was going to say, I saw it shoot up and then I saw it come down. So your hand's back up again. So I'm going to go to Lester, Ife, Bella, and then Atienne, if that's okay. All right, so Lester.
I think it's actually a really important discussion about the priorities of the Black Equity organisation. I think that the points that Keisha was making actually, like Siobhan said, came at a really important time. And I think that one point I definitely, well, I agree with a lot of what she said, but one of the points that I think really kind of hit home is about hearing some of the same things as before. But that's because in many ways these problems have been around for so long that there's a pile of reports that have got a lot of recommendations that have not been acted upon. And one of the arguments that we had around the Sewell report, which the government commissioned, that somehow concluded that institutional racism doesn't exist. I'm not quite sure how Tony Sewell came to that conclusion. But the argument there was actually that this report was ignoring all of the other reports which said what the government needs to do. It was just trying to sweep all of those away. But I think the discussion that we're having here today, well, my interpretation of it is actually about saying, the debate's been going on for 70 years about institutional and systemic racism in Britain, covering all sections of society, from housing to employment to health and so on. What are our priorities today? And I think that trying to not just have a discussion about what problems are, but actually say, what are the things which we really need to most focus on is one of the reasons why I really welcome the consultation that BO is doing. The point I originally put my hand up for, and I'll make it a very, very, very brief, is really picking up on the point about the law and intersectionality, because we've got an equalities law which is really last century. That it doesn't recognise intersectionality. It recognises individual protected characteristics, but if you're discriminated against, you have to pick one, which is just absolutely nonsense. Yet the Equality Act was introduced, and remember the old Commission for Racial Equality was abolished because of intersectionality, but actually we never got intersectionality. So we definitely need to sort of focus on that and change the law to recognise it. But also I think we need to focus on monitoring as well, which is the basics. Before we even do any action, we've got to know what the data is. And when it comes to budgets, chancellors' budgets, they're not publishing their equality impact assessment. The Equality and Human Rights Commission, the watchdog, which is useless in many ways, one of the things it did do was did a study on the cumulative impact of successive budgets on disadvantaged groups. And the government have continued to ignore that. And budgets, the fiscal decisions, the tax and spend decisions, every year it impose additional burdens on Black communities over and above everything else that we're suffering. So I think that looking at budgets, looking at the law and reforming the law, I think is really important.
So takeaway from my listening is you're saying look at equality impact assessment reports, which I think are no longer mandatory in lots of areas of life, and with regards to the Equality Act, intersectionality needs to be brought in. So it's not just discrimination on one characteristic.
Marcus, they're compulsory in Scotland, by the way, not England, but in Scotland they are.
In Scotland they still are?
They are, yes, with my employment law hat on, just so you know.
Thank you, Miranda. Okay, great. Ife, Bella, Atienne, and then Janet. Ife.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. I'd like to jump in and respond to what Keisha said, because a lot of the things were very relevant, but I want to talk about when we talk about grass level, how do we get the ground running? It's in our homes. It's absolutely in our homes. So with the work that I do is with parents, and this is what I'm noticing massively. So first of all, this is a quote I want to read, which kind of supports a lot of the information and how I communicate with Black families when I'm helping them to raise happy, healthy, confident children with high levels of self-esteem. And first of all, I just want to read this quote, which I heard by T.D. Jakes. He says, Black people are an evolving group of human beings with a history of abuse, which many of us are still enslaved by in some ways, while others have escaped. He says his great-grandmother was a slave. We tried to make slavery like it was 1,000 years ago, but it's really closer to last week. He says, I was a child when my great-grandmother was a slave. My father's grandfather's mother was a slave, and we're just a few generations from slavery. Then he goes on to say that it demeaned and destroyed every aspect of family and life. And then we were freed. We were wonderfully freed. And now you become a father. Well, what's a father? Now you become a mother. Well, what's a mother? And he goes on to say that the molestation of a nation, and what's happened is it's created effects like self-esteem, fear, self-hatred, cutting yourself, and all of those things. And I heard him say it, and I thought, you know what, TD Jakes is absolutely true about trauma. But where we take control? Keisha has, we individually in our homes. So beating our children, slapping our children, reprimanding them, having a bad tongue at them. I mean, the way that we communicate with our children is absolutely imperative to how we get them out in the world. Now, if the society around us is falling down, if when you come home, you have a safe place to be yourself, you have a one parent who loves you unconditionally, we have to break the cycle. And I'll say this as well. I saw Oprah Winfrey interviewing Michael Jackson's father, Joe Jackson. And Joe Jackson, she said to Joe Jackson in this interview, she said, what about the beatings? Like, we all saw what you did to those children. You beat them. And Joe Jackson leant in and he said, we didn't know any better then. We didn't know any better. We know better now. So as parents, as people, we have to educate ourselves. We have to make sure that the way we communicate with our children, we are raising their self-esteem, not tearing it down. I go into families, and this is really important to me. So when I go into a family and I watch how the mum or the dad talks to the child, I'm saying you are repeating it. Stop hitting your children. Stop using destructive criticism to get them to be a certain way. We have to love our children unconditionally and create safe spaces so that when they go out into the world, which is a hard place, that they have high levels of self-esteem, high levels of confidence. They're in an environment where they can communicate with their parents about everything, where they can be free to be themselves. You have to make sure that the siblings aren't against each other. We have to create a space at home where our children feel loved, safe, and protected so that when they go out to the world, do you know what happens when they go out in the world? Yeah, they're going to experience so much, but at home you nurture them and build them up so that when they do get racism, when they do experience prejudice, when they do get overlooked at work, when they have to go out and be 5 times as good or 10 times as good, our children have it in them. We must stop hitting our children. It's that. We've got to stop it, because what it does is it creates fear, anxiety, and it makes us afraid, and it stops taking risks, it stops dreaming big. There is so much on this. And when I go into these families, and I work with a lot of Christian families as well, it's not because we're bad people, it's because we think, I know, I want them to behave better, I want them to be safer, I don't want them to get killed. So we are acting from a place of fear, but we have to start changing the narrative at home. So, you know, when I say, in my level of my experience of what I know, starts in the home. I've got 2 black boys. Every single day I look at them in their eyes and I tell them I love them, I believe in them, they can be anything, they can do anything. And yet, even if you have nothing, what you say as a parent, we are the biggest influences in our children's lives. That's what I'm leaving there. We've got to start.
Okay, thank you so much. And I don't think anyone would disagree with regards to making sure that we start from the home of, you know, and the power of love. Bella, I'm going to come to you, and Etienne, I'm going to come to you. I think your hand's down, but if you still want to come in, that would be great. Bella.
Firstly, I wanted to congratulate the last audience caller that came in and gave her opinions. And I totally understand where she's coming from, that yes, in the marketplace, the public sector, private, charitable organizations, CICs like ourselves, you are going to hear maybe people in their suits that are talking about their organization needs. And I totally understand where she's coming from about there's no change made. Now, I'm here to speak about mental health, but what I wanted to let her know of is that within organizations such as this, within, say, the world of the UK, you will get those that will make false promises, but you will get those that are standing and passionate to what they say and believe. Now, as I said, I really just want to respond to mental health. We started Think Tenacity, or me as the founder, as lived in experiences. So I think when we're challenging organizations, I think we need to challenge them and ask them, do you have an impact report? What are your missions? Can I see your mission statement? Can I see your organization's values? What are the change you want to make? And do you have lived in experiences? Because an organization like myself, the reason I started it was I had lived in racial experiences, being a suicide survivor, and I lived with 3 mental illnesses. When I was in the A&E department following my suicide attempt, only within 2 hours later in the A&E department, they said they wanted to send me home. So all the work that we're doing is lived in experiences, and we're continuously asking our community, what support do you need? Do you want access to Black therapists? Well, how does that look? Is that by telephone? Is that by online services? The other thing that I wanted to add to that as well is that I talked about impact reports. Impact reports are really important. Are you matching what you say? Are you fulfilling what you set out to do? One obstacle that I face, and I don't know if other Black organisations face this as well, is we can set out to serve our community and make change and make those change with evidence. But one thing that we do come across, and that is a challenge, where I welcome the lady who gave her opinion, is when it also is required for data to fill in forms, those forms are not filled in. Those surveys are not always completed. So we're not always getting that average. We're not always getting an adequate picture of what the community needs without those survey forms. The last point I wanted to make is I'm very passionate about, if I say something, I'm going to do it, but also to partner up with other, say, non-Black organisations. So in our organisation, Think Tenacity, we've made a point of building charity partnerships, say, with the Samaritans and Rethink. And at the same time, well, I challenge those charities to say, well, what's the diversity looking like? Do you have Black therapists? They also come back and say to me, we struggle because we're not getting data. We don't know how to act on this. But I think it's a case that to look at each individual organisation, because some of us are bringing that lived in and grassroots experience to make change.
Okay, no, thank you. And thank you for addressing both macro and micro solutions, or very specific solutions there as well. Actually, you had your hand up after the, so you had your hand up. I don't know if you still have something you would like to share.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say, but in terms of what I want to say is that from the perspective of a lot of young Black people, we're kind of living in a moment in which we're seeing these issues across generations. We're seeing the kind of energy that came out in 2020, but not seeing particularly kind of lasting institutional change. But I think whenever I have young conversations with young people around these issues, one thing that's always a constant kind of source of inspiration is work that organizations like the Black Panther Party did to directly address the needs of our community in their communities. Like they ran free breakfast programs. They did stuff around providing direct access to medical care, which is a bit different in the American context, but they did stuff to hold the police to account. And obviously, because of what they did, they face massive repression from the US government. But I think one kind of thing that's happening in this moment is that obviously we are in a position where young Black people still face massively high rates of school exclusion, various different problems in the education system that anyone could tell you about. But we are seeing young Black people who are gaining access to very prestigious spaces and institutions and careers where you can just go off and make a lot of money. But I think the thing is that we have to work out we kind of have to operate from positions of agreement and show how the same forces pretty much impact us universally across different intersections, whether it be poor quality housing or kind of dysfunctional economic system. I think the way towards pushing things forward, or at least one angle, is about recognizing how all these issues are fundamentally interconnected. Like the Black Panther Party recognized that economic inequality, healthcare inequality, all these other issues are interdependent. But I think one thing that's also we have to think about as young people, and young people are thinking about, is how you can't rely on governments, because governments don't operate from a position of it's a kind of political calculation about how to secure the next general election. But I think as much as it feels like things are going around in a circle, I think there is it's all about how we can use chances like this to kind of push things forward. And I don't have all the answers, no one will, but yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, and definitely bringing in that international perspective and the history of anti-racism from the US and the Black Panthers. Janet, you had your hand up.
Yes. Firstly, I want to say thanks to Siobhan for her explanation, her response to Aisha, sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly, because I can sympathize with all of what she's saying, because over a period of time, we've got many organizations, and from her perspective, maybe they haven't delivered the things that she wants to, but we're looking forward and upwards. One of the things I would say is that we need to look at other communities within the UK and how they've overcome all these difficulties. So if we're wanting government to do things for us, which probably they might not, we have to look at all the reports and then ask them, what is it you want to do for the Black community? So you have a roadmap or a plan of how you're going to implement all these things that are being recommended to you. You probably don't have to do all of them. So 1, 2, 3, that's what you're going to do. And we need to come together as a community to monitor, to see whether the government or whoever it is has changed the policy and what the effects are. But unfortunately, my one thing is that only us can do it for ourselves, because we've been talking about it for ages and ages, and some government policies would change and then it would revert back to, business as usual. I'll just give you an example. There were a couple of things happening with young Black women within certain communities in the UK. And no matter what you say, the government of its own did not get up and do that. It was an awful lot of Black women that came together and changed the laws. And we've just done it again. So I keep saying the answer to most of the things that are happening, while you might need the state, but the answer is in our hands. And we need to make a lot of noise, and we need to get the commitment from the powers that be if we want to change anything. Because I doubt that in the next 5 years, at least, if the current government will move towards the goal that we think they need to move towards. They're not going to do it. We need to get ourselves together. They're not going to do us a favor. We need to come together as a diaspora of people, because within the various organizations, between the various groups, there are many resources. There are many intelligent people, many intellectuals, many people with research, business, and other abilities that could bring us together. We're not together, and we can't be depending on these people to change, the government or anybody else to change. The change is in our hands, so we've got to do that.
Thank you. Now, Lee, you've been relatively silent today in the session, but I've seen you've been quite active in the chat. So great that you got your hand up and I can call on you. So, Lee.
Yeah, look, I think a lot has been said, and I think it points to something I said at the opening. There's a paradigm shift going on, and people need to wake up to where young people are really at, and they're not at replicating the failures of the past. And so anything that looks like, smells like, presents as if it's a strategy that was used previously, this post-George, pre-George Floyd designation I'm putting on the world, just doesn't smash past the smell test. I think the thing about the successful struggles, is that they have our three main prongs. They have a political wing, they have an economic wing to ensure economic independence, and they have a legal strategy. If you look at any liberation struggle, it's within democratic societies, struggle for equality, it's had those three things. Yeah, and you can look at any issue, be it animal welfare to climate change and so on, immigration, that's where we have our greatest success, in the courts and mobilizing people. And I think that's the missing part in our struggle here in the United Kingdom. BEO has got to, one of its focuses was about legal challenge. And we need to challenge people in the court about their systematic failure to meet the needs of our community. And that must be judiciable. And whatever the complexity, BEO has got to get the best legal minds we can find and constitute a legal strategy that poses an existential threat to this government. Because we've seen through Windrush and everything else that even where they admit moral culpability, unless they're forced to deliver equality and justice by law, then they fudge it into some long grass, and Windrush people end up dying before they've even had an opportunity to receive their compensation. So I think that's important. I think the other thing is important, if I may, is knitting together a civil rights struggle. Look, as powerful as we think we are not sufficient number in this country to be able to force the kind of legislative change we need to see if we are to enshrine discriminatory protection for our children in the next generation. This government is thinking about abolishing its commitment to the European Convention of Human Rights and replacing it with a watered down version of Bill of Rights, which will weaken all aspects of anti-discriminatory protection, not just for Black people, but for people right across the board, travelers, women on reproductive rights, children's rights, etc. There'll be no eventual appeal to a European court that can overturn the institutionalized racism of the British government. So we are desperate to have the economic end come together with the political end to provide the kind of funding that allows for independent advocacy and voices to raise themselves up. And for BEO to use its convening power to bring together these disparate groups as they are struggling in silos into a more critical mass that raises the extent to which we are likely to achieve the kind of change that we want to see. And the final thing is that people of my age group need to get out the way and let young people come and lead. Yes, they do need advice. Yes, they do need support. And yes, we would need to do that for them and give them the advice of what was successful and not in our struggle. But, it's for every generation to find their own way. And we must be behind them in supporting the facilitation of the transformation of the struggle by bringing in young Black leaders and providing the space for Black women, young Black men, Black lesbian and gays. All of that has to be in the mix, because at the moment, and I'll finish on this, Chair, at the moment, we're fighting an existential threat against our very survival. 3 more degrees on this planet, and already people are burning in Canada, people are starving in Somalia, millions are forced into migration, travailing seas and dying at the bottom of oceans, being held hostage and sold into slavery in Libya and Northern Africa. You look at the crisis around the world, and then you look at that challenge, existential challenge in climate change. I'm surprised these kids aren't taking up for armed revolution, in my view, because the future that we bequeathed to them, right, is worse than the one that the Windrush generation bequeathed to us. And that is a fundamental betrayal of our our genetic destiny to improve the world for the next generation. And we failed on that. Race equality is worse. Social mobility is worse. Economic deprivation is worse. Yada, 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 right? And so now, if we weren't able to do the job, why don't we get out of the way and give support to young people who are prepared to do the job?
Okay, thank you so much for that, Lee. And I definitely think that people are, in part, the listening sessions, I think is for us to, is for BEO to be listening to all those different groups and to make sure they're listening to the younger people that you're talking about, and having the younger people at the very heart of the organization, such as Etienne as well. But Miranda, who's at the heart of the organization, has got her hand up as part of the listening session for and representative of BEO. Miranda.
Yeah, all I was going to do, because I think we're approaching the end, is just to feedback from my perspective what I've heard as the person who's representing the staff today. Siobhan and Atian are on our board, but I am representing the staff team who need to deliver everything you've been asking about, and trust me, we're on it. We are, and I'm just going to quickly tell you what we're doing in response to some of that. First of all, I just want to say a massive thank you. I can't keep up with the chat. I can't keep up with the questions. The energy that's out there, it is just absolutely phenomenal that this community is engaged. We're hungry. We're ready. BEO is 9 weeks and 1 day old. We are a baby, but we start as we mean to go on. And this is why we are conducting a listening tour, because we need to start off in the right way from listening to you, our community. And that's what today is about. And we know many of you have been disappointed and frustrated before. We will have more of these sessions. But just to quickly run through some of the things you've raised, you talked about trust. Absolutely. We are a community that doesn't trust. We've been let down many, many times before. We know that. The board and the staff team know that. We talked about trauma. We've decided, our values, how we are going to conduct our work. That will be available if it's not on the website already. We are going to have what we're calling a trauma-informed approach to everything. Okay, we're going to be putting a black lens across everything. You talked about the fact we need to do things differently. Precisely. It's not about, I think somebody talked about working in the system. It's about saying, well, what do we do differently? So an example of that is looking at ableism and the education system and our own application forms. We're redeveloping them. We're not going to lead with education and criminal records all over the application form, because our community has been disproportionately treated badly in the education system, and we've been given unjust convictions and cautions many times. Therefore, BEO's own processes need to think, okay, how are we going to look at applications for jobs through a black lens, and then roll that out in terms of best practice to other organizations. Intersectionality, absolutely key. Our board member, Michelle Daly, is a co-founder with Viola of Disabled Black Lives Matter. She is, again, working with us on our internal policies and also for the Black disabled community. And the Equality Act, I completely agree. Class is missing. Section 1 of the Equality Act is about class as a protected characteristic, and it's never been brought in. BEO can work with allies on that because we are disproportionately in the lower socioeconomic groups. And just quickly, you asked about education. I love the idea of Saturday trade schools. Timmy, our colleague who's leading on our education work, is listening in. We're going to be having a State of Black Education report where we'll be collecting evidence. This is from cradle to grave, lifelong education from Black people in the UK from the minute they're born until they, you never stop learning. So that's some of the things we're doing. Youth, Atian will be involved. We've got Jermaine Jackson on the call as well to develop with Jake Ferguson, who's also on the call today, a youth summit and proper youth work. Two last things, faith communities were mentioned. We have not forgotten you, absolutely not. There are still board places available on our board. We will be talking to the faith communities. We've been speaking to other communities, the Jewish community, the Board of Deputies, about how they, as a community who've experienced trauma, have also built resilience. That's important for us. And the last thing, Lee mentioned climate change. Absolutely, climate change and race equity goes together. I have family in the Caribbean, very small island in the Eastern Caribbean, Mia Motley in Barbados and the neighboring islands. If we go above 2% of a global temperature, that affects our families. So we're not just Black British. BEO is not just thinking about Black people here, we're thinking about our connection to our families and our friends across the world. So I can't answer everything, but from everything you've said, these are the main things I picked out. And I can assure you from the staff team And remember, we're very small at the moment. We still have to recruit. We still have to have a proper volunteer program, because the energy I'm seeing here, we want you all to be part of the family and the BO army. So, rest assured, our intentions are genuine. Our board's intentions are genuine. Have a look at them. They are not only the elite people at the top you think they are. Just have a look at Ian, look at Michelle, look at Yvonne from Ubele. We will have more board members, and we are going to have a mix of our community. Black people are not a monolith, and we will not be a monolith. So sorry, Marcus, I'm listening, but I did want to kind of respond, and that's all I've got to say. And thank you to the panelists who I've learned so much from, because it's been absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much, Miranda. Now that brings us to 9 o'clock. What I'm going to be summing up in a second, but what would be really useful is if all the panelists could, I see some of you are already putting your emails and your Twitter handles and different ways in which people can find out more about you or contact you in the chat group. So I would encourage you all to do that while I do a very brief summing up, because we've run out of time. So I'd like to apologize for the people that had their hands up. We had Hoffman, Black Root, Fusiane Dawuda, all had your hands up in the audience. And I know there are other people that wanted to come in from the audience that I wasn't able to get to, but as Miranda pointed out, this is just the second of the listening sessions, and there will be many more, and there'll be many other panel discussions and other presentations, which I'm sure BEO will be presenting as well, which I'm sure hopefully will be involved in some of them. Thank you, Miranda. And so there'll be lots more, because even 2 hours at the start of it, I thought 2 hours is such a long time, but 2 hours has absolutely flown by, and we weren't able to cover, I didn't even cover all the questions I had. So thank you, everybody, and apologies for people I wasn't able to go to. I would just like to thank all the panelists tonight. Thank you, Lester Holloway, Iola Ofamehan, Chantal Land, Ife Thomas, Lee Jasper, Janet File, as well as our BEO representatives who are an integral part of the listening session and came in and didn't listen and talked as well. So that was also wonderful, and responded and were accountable. So Miranda Grell, Siobhan Owens, Atienne Akech was also, thank you so much. And of course, thank you very much for our signers today, Rebecca Spencer and Rachel Jones. Is there anybody that I've missed out on the panel?
Yes, the person who put this all together.
Oh,
again.
Yes, thank you.
Last but not least,
JK, thank you so much. You only ever see JK as the symbol of BE, it's right now, it's my top left-hand corner. So, but yes, she is definitely the powerhouse that assembles everybody, that organizes all of this, that none of this would be possible without her. So thank you very much, JK. And finally, to all the audience for some great questions and comments. I found today's session incredibly interesting, giving me food for thought. I hope this has done the same for the Black Equity Organization. In fact, I know it's done the same for BEO, because they're already starting to respond. And if you want to find out more about Black Equity Organization, be sure to sign up to their newsletter. You can find out all their details online at blackequityorg.com. Thank you, and only 3 minutes over.
Marcus,
Good
can
night.
I just say for housekeeping, if people want a recording, or JK, if you could tell us, because will we be able to see all the things in the chat afterwards? Because I've missed a lot of it, or will it all disappear? How can people read through the chat and watch this back afterwards?
We might actually hear JK's voice. I know
Please,
she
JK.
very rarely makes an appearance. So JK.
Good evening, everybody. JK here. So just for everybody's information, this whole session will be available on YouTube, and for everybody who's registered, present, or couldn't make it today, we will make sure that everybody has the link to watch the video. We'll also be, we've prescribed a lot of what was being spoken about today, so we're going to put that into a report, and we're going to feed back to our senior leaders, and that will feed in those comments. Your expressions will feed into everything we do moving forward. Many of you had some great ideas about having many different sessions on specific items, and those pertain to our actual pillars. If you go to our website, they're all there on our pillars, and we are working on it. This is only the first of many, And we have to test the waters to see if there was even appetite for this type of discussion. And you guys have really shown there really is appetite for it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, JK. And will people be able to see the chat again back, or is that not possible?
No, that's asking a little bit too much. What we will.
Okay, all right. I'm going to have to try and scroll. Don't cut us off then, because I'm going to spend some time looking at all of the chat before I log out, just to
Be saved, but what I'm saying is that it'll be difficult to get everything out to people. So this is the reason why.
Oh no, of course.
Sorry to interrupt. On the chat, somebody called Marina has said that there's a way to do it. Control, like it's up there, and you kind of can copy and paste the chat. So
okay.
Someone called Marina showed.
We might work on that because we really want to capture all as much as we can.
You were asking something different, and what I'm saying is that everything will be saved and scribed. That's what I said.
Perfect. That's great. Lovely.
Okay, thank you so much. So the chat will be saved, but it might not be able to be made public again, but it will be saved for everybody to, from BEO to digest and look at the points that were made. And people will be able to watch the entire session online again on YouTube. Okay. And I think someone's asking whether they'll be able to get access to the transcript, which I'm sure they will. Okay.
We can think about that. And Marcus, a huge thank you to you. Nobody's thanked you tonight. Thank you so much. Marcus is on a journey with us. For those of you who don't know, from our launch through to last week to this week, we're very, very pleased and honoured that he's still part of the journey with us. You've been amazing so far, and thank you again for tonight as well.
Thank you so much. It's been really enjoyable, tiring, but very, very enjoyable. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We're now 6 minutes over. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, audience. Thank you, BEO. All right, good night.